Hi there, I'm Vincent Bos and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing why moving on attracts an ex, the psychology of rejection. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing why moving on attracts an ex, the psychology of rejection. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you may be wondering why people say that if you move on, you increase the chance of attracting your ex. The basis of this concept is due to something that you are feeling yourself: rejection. The psychology of rejection refers to the emotional and cognitive processes that individuals experience when they are rejected or excluded by others. Rejection can take many forms, such as being turned down for a job, being excluded from a social group, or experiencing the end of a romantic relationship. If a dumpee moves on, or as I prefer to say, moves forward, then their dumper is often likely to feel a form of rejection as well. In today's podcast, I'll be discussing 3 key aspects of the psychology of rejection in connection to why moving on attracts an ex. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is emotional response. Rejection triggers negative emotions like sadness, anger, and shame. It can deeply affect one's self-esteem and self-worth, leading to feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. If you move on from your ex, you are removing the safety net that they have to fall back on if they realise that their new chosen path was a bad choice. If they don't have you reaffirming their value from afar, then they can feel rejection, even though it was actually their choice to end your two's relationship. So what we can see from this is that even though the dumper is obviously the person who ends the relationship, they can feel rejected by you, the dumpee. And this is because even though a dumper does not want a dumpee to chase them, the dumper is often expecting their dumpee to chase them. Now, even though a dumper doesn't necessarily want a dumpee in their orbit right now, they don't necessarily want their dumpee in and around their life, they do somewhat expect them to be there in their orbit, there and ready for if and when the dumper believes that they need to go back on their decision. Now, I'm not saying that dumpers think about this in an active and conscious way. This could be something which is very much in the back of the mind of the dumper, something in the subconscious rather than the conscious mind. But I would say from all of my research that most dumpers like the thought of their dumpee in the background reaffirming their value, even though they don't want them to be chasing them. This doesn't mean that your ex, the dumper, is going to appreciate you texting, calling, or knocking on their door. But most dumpers would like the thought that if their new chosen path is not going the way that they had hoped and they had desired, that they could turn back, go back to where they came from, and find the dumpee who loved and cherished them there waiting. And this is why the emotional response of somebody who feels rejection can be something which triggers sadness, anger, and shame, to name a few emotions. And what we see from this is that if and when your ex-dumper starts to feel an emotional response due to rejection, this is when they can start to feel like they've made a huge error of judgment. Not only are they already feeling they've gone down the wrong path, which is why they're starting to think and wonder about you, the dumpee, anyway, but if you are nowhere to be seen, if you as a dumpee is living your life to the full, moving forward on your own path, then this is going to really pull on that emotional response. The rejection triggers the sadness, the anger, the shame on themselves, thinking, what have I done? I chose to end this relationship with somebody who truly loved me. I've gone down this path doing my own thing. It's not worked out. I've turned back, and the person who really cared and loved me has now gone. What can I do to get them back? And this is where the power shift can take place. The emotional response of somebody who feels rejected is somewhat desperate. You should know yourself as a dumpee, because right now you are feeling rejected. We have to remember that rejection breeds obsession. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast, about why moving on attracts an ex, the psychology of rejection. And point number 2 is social belonging. So rejection threatens our need for social acceptance, creating a sense of isolation and disconnection. It can leave individuals feeling lonely and excluded, impacting their overall well-being. So a dumper will enter what I like to refer to as the single honeymoon period after ending your relationship. This is a period of time which lasts, generally speaking, between 6 and 12 months, where somebody is really concentrating on doing their own thing. They've ended a relationship because they did not feel that it was fulfilling and likely to give them a satisfaction forevermore. Unfortunately, this is something as a dumpee you have to realise and accept. A dumper did not feel fulfilled. They've ended a relationship and they are now going on their own path, as we spoke of in point number 1. This is the single honeymoon period. They will likely spend time with friends but they didn't have opportunity to before. They might join new classes, groups and clubs. They might be living their life in a way that they felt they couldn't do within the relationship. And this might mean dating new people. Now, it doesn't mean that anybody they date right now is going to be a long-lasting forever relationship, because this would be known as a rebound relationship, and rebound relationships often last a matter of weeks or months. So this shows the dumper has entered the single honeymoon period. They're living their life the way they want to, but everything which is new eventually feels old. And when the dumper enters the single honeymoon period, they're feeling like, this is what I want to do. These are the people I want to spend time with, whether these are friends they already know, new friends they are making, or potential new dating connections. It's the social belonging which they feel is something they want to experiment with because they were not feeling fulfilled, unfortunately, in your past connection. So this is all well and good for 6 to 12 months, but when, like I've just said, things which are new start to feel old, when things which were once excited start to feel mundane, when the experiences they are having, going to classes, groups, clubs, parties, whatever it may be, eventually it doesn't feel as new, as bright and as exciting as it once did. Maybe people they're spending time with, their friends, are starting to pair off and get into relationships themselves, and there are less people within the social circle. Maybe the dates that they have perhaps gone on have turned out to be, as I've just said earlier, rebound relationships which don't go very far because it's very hard to find a long-term compatible partner. If these things start to take place, this is where the social belonging really starts to be tested. The rejection of not only you moving on with your life, but the life they've now created with themselves can develop a situation where they start to feel that this is not working for me. They haven't heard from you, and although they didn't really want you to be pestering them, they are a bit surprised. Where's my dumpee? What are they doing? Maybe they're living a life much happier than when I was with them. Maybe they are happier that I've gone. Maybe they feel that their life is better without me. And on top of that, the people I'm now spending time with, well, they're disappearing as well. They're getting new girlfriends and new boyfriends. They're doing different things with their time. The things that I started to do on a weekend, for instance, are now starting to feel boring. Where is the love? Where are the people that are going to support me? And you start to feel that your network of connections is shrinking and shrinking. So as I said, rejection threatens our need for social acceptance. We start to feel our self-esteem shrinking, and the safety net, which is you, now seems to have gone. This is another reason as why moving forward with your life can attract an ex. It's the intrigue. It's the feeling that although I've dumped you, you've disappeared. I'm assuming you're living your life to the full and having a great time. Whereas I know that my time right now is starting to feel boring, it's starting to feel mundane. The amount of people I spent time with is shrinking by the week. I'm not having a good time, but I'm going to guess that you are, and it's the unknown that creates that. Now, you as a dumpee, you might be going through your own tough time, you might not be hanging around with many people at all, but your ex-dumper can only fill in the blanks in their mind because they haven't heard from you. I mean, this is what you are doing with your dumper. You're worried every single week that they're going out and having the best time of their life. The reality is, but once you're a number of weeks or months after your breakup, your ex-dumper is unlikely to be doing much at all. Generally speaking, after an initial time of spending time with different people, maybe going to parties and things, doing what they want to do, often dumpers start to spend a fair bit of time alone. This is the most likely outcome, but your mind doesn't tell you that. Your mind tells you that every single weekend they are having the best time of their life. Well, guess what? Your ex-dumper is starting to think that about you as well. And once their life doesn't seem as shiny anymore, they're going to be really wondering what you are doing, why you aren't texting them, and starting to feel that they are missing you. This type of social belonging that they desire is no longer being fulfilled by anybody, and hence they miss you, they miss your connection, they miss the love you gave them. And this is where an ex can start to feel like, maybe I've made a mistake, maybe I should reach out to my dumpee. Now, if you would like advice and support going through a breakup, if you want to increase the chance of getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific circumstances. Go to my website www.dateme.tips for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast about why moving on attracts an ex, the psychology of rejection. And point number 3 is coping strategies. So people respond to rejection differently. Some may seek support, engage in self-care, and learn from experience. Others may resort to withdrawal. I would suggest that dumpers are much less likely to seek support from my research. They are much less likely to feel that they need to grow as a person. They are much less likely to engage in self-care. Now, this means that they are much more likely to feel the pangs of loneliness if and when their new life feels less exciting. So as I was describing in point number 2, when the social network they've started to build begins to collapse, which it generally and often does, this is when the dumper is searching and seeking for coping strategies. And it's very unlikely that they're going to be doing the self-development that you as a dumpee is doing. It's just not as common. People who end relationships don't feel that they need to work on themselves. They've ended a relationship, they felt, well, okay, this person, you the dumpee, wasn't right for me because I've got everything together. I know what I want to do, and this isn't quite working. So let me live my life. They don't feel that they need to improve, and we all need to improve. I need to improve, you do, and so do they. So when you have a person who doesn't believe that they need to go through the self-care for personal growth and development, they are unlikely to seek support as you are right now listening to this podcast. And what are you likely to do if you don't seek support? You are likely to make rash decisions. And one such rash decision is reaching out to their dumpee, something that perhaps the dumper hasn't done for many months, if not years, to this point. And they haven't done it because they don't want to give their dumpee false hope. The difference is now that the hope would be genuine because your ex-dumper is potentially starting to feel like they've made a huge mistake and they actually want to move back on what they previously said. You, the dumpee, went through the grind, then you started to recover, grow, and now you're living your life to the full. Your ex-dumper is doing this in reverse. They started living their life to the full, now they're starting to question themselves, and eventually they will start going through the grind. This is where the power switch takes place. This is why your ex-dumper could come to the decision that their best coping strategy is to desire you by contacting you, by trying to reconnect with you. Now, you as a dumpee, you have a choice if and when you hear from your ex, whether you want to try to develop this budding reconnection or whether you want to just move forward with your life. That is up to you. But what you will see is that your ex-dumper is going to have to cope with this one way or the other. And as I said earlier, rejection breeds obsession. The obsession that you felt in the early days after the breakup and that you are now coping with is something that your ex-dumper hasn't had to learn how to cope with. And this is why they're much more likely to reach out to you, perhaps as you did early after your breakup. So, what does this mean? Well, it reaffirms the point that moving on, or as I like to say, moving forward, can attract an ex, because the psychology of rejection showcases the possibility that your ex, the dumper, is likely to come to a point where they miss the comfort, they miss the safety net, they miss you. Now, whether or not this is enough to reconnect will be not just up to you, but up to them as well. It's obviously something you both need to come to terms with. This is why you as a dumpee need to grow, because if and when your ex-dumper reaches out to you for the comfort, for the desire, you need to be wowing them. Because if they find you as just the person that they originally left, okay, something might work out for a short while, but unfortunately it's probably not going to last forever. However, if they reach out to you because they miss you, and then they are astonished by the personal growth that you have shown, then this is where things can work. Your previous relationship did not last. It didn't work. Your new relationship can only work if you grow as a person, and also that you believe your ex-dumper is still the right person for you, because dumpees often outgrow their exes. So many times the dumper reaches out and the dumpee actually rejects them, because as I've already said, the dumper is unlikely to have grown, the dumpee has grown a huge amount. It will be up to you, and it's win-win. You can either get your ex back, or, because you've grown as a person, you can find somebody even better. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.